Hello everybody, welcome back. So this is going to be the spoiler review / rant review for the Splintered Hearts Hammers MC series by Nicola Jane. I did have this filmed before. There's issues with the footage. No, I didn't lose the footage this time, but this is what happens when a non-technically gifted person tries to do a hobby that requires tech. So, this kind of through one of my coworkers who was actually very much looking forward to this review. The last 2 days I've come into work to hearing, is it done yet? Is it done yet? So, Melina, this video is dedicated to you, and you better comment and like this video because you've been riding my butt about it. So, you wanted the tea, and here it is. So, please do not read this or watch this video if you haven't watched my previous one. I'm not going to get too much into like quick recaps. I'm just going to go into the parts that really annoyed me, which, especially with the first story, we'll get a little bit more into the story, but you may not know what's going on if you haven't watched that first one or read the book. If you are planning to read the book and you don't want spoilers, wait until after you've read it to watch this. The only reason you should be watching this video is if A, you're not planning to read the book, or B, you're worried about the triggers and you want to see what is going to happen and decide if that will affect whether or not you get the book. So, book 1, Cooper and Mila. As we know, Mila was hired to be a nanny for Cooper's nephew, whom Cooper has custody of because his sister died from, I believe it was a drug overdose. We know, as you know from the story, his former wife comes back after he's engaged to Mila, and a whole slew of crazy sets in. So let's get into why I hate Cooper with an ungodly passion. Okay, Cooper from the get-go, hiring Mila as the nanny, is a straight up asshole to her from day one. He does not let up ever. The few times you might think he has let up, it was really a moment of weakness for him, and he feels the inclination to put Mila in her place almost directly right after, treating her essentially like dog shit. The first time they are intimate with each other is the stereotypical non-consent trope in romances. However, it's not done in a way that really makes any sort of insinuation that it is in any way okay. Typically, the way I usually read most non-consent scenes is that it's like role-playing, but without it being stated that that's what they're doing. Whereas in this one, it felt more like legitimate non-consent. And it's like, oh, well, she was, wet or whatever. And it's like, yeah, no, but there was still a flat no. And then he proceeds to treat her like shit. And then when he gets wind that she might be interested in somebody else in the MC, somebody he has a personal problem with, he goes off telling her she's fired, she's no longer the nanny, and telling all of the men in the MC that she is now open game and, open for business, basically. Thankfully, the other men in the MC do not take him up on this because A, they know for whatever reason they can tell that Cooper has feelings for Mila, but also they've also kind of come to like Mila, and they don't want to treat her as a club whore. When Mila rightfully calls him an asshole for this whole scene, he straight up tries to choke her to death. And it takes multiple members of the MC to get him off of her. This is the first time where you really see how much or how little Mila has any form of agency in any part of the story, because she does not leave, she stays. The argument being to take care of the nephew and to make sure he is okay, but really she just has no inclination on how to be a self-sufficient person. She'll just take whatever's dished out at her, essentially. And this happens throughout the book, like nonstop. So then eventually Cooper comes back to Mila and they have sex again, and she's not sure what's going on. And so in a very ill-advised, not thought out, impulsive, childlike decision, she sleeps with the one member that Cooper has the problem with. Not saying she's not free to do so. We've all done stupid things, but considering how things have gone, she should have left like multiple times over by this point, and we're not even halfway through the book. Cooper finds out when she tells him, because she's talking to Cooper, says, I get, what is this? And he's like, well, we're together now. And she's like, so we're exclusive. And, he's kind of like, well, yeah. And so she, trying to be mature, explains to him, well, I slept with someone else, and, because I didn't know what we were. She's trying to be honest. She's actually trying to do the right thing. Cooper has a shit fit, takes her and forces her to get a property tattoo on her arm, on her forearm, and then proceeds to take her back to the clubhouse for a party to celebrate the fact that he has now claimed her as an old lady, and then proceeds to make out with other club whores right in front of her, just shooting evil looks at her the whole night. And when she finally calls him out on it, rightfully so, he just looks at her and says, oh, it doesn't feel good, does it? So they're finally together, and you would think things would maybe start to calm down. Maybe he would start to realize I've been an ass. No. You find out that where he's been disappearing to throughout the book is the house that he shared with his first wife, who died in a car accident when she was trying to leave him. And the reason he didn't tell Mila is because it didn't feel right to have her there in the house that he had shared with the woman he had loved. And Mila just kind of goes with it. He proposes, they decide to get married, and she's just going with everything. She doesn't have a backbone. I don't think she really has anything going on in her head, to be honest. She has the personality of a frickin' bagel. Not even a bagel, a saltine cracker or something. Anyways, so then the day before the wedding, Cooper's wife comes back, because guess what? She didn't die. She faked her death, and her brother, who is the one that Mila slept with, who's had an issue with Cooper, is the one who helped her to fake her death. And he brought her back so that Cooper could not marry Mila. So then, Cooper is back with his first wife, and Mila asks him the day of what is supposed to be their wedding if he slept with her. And he did. So now, Mila stays on as the nanny, has to see Cooper and his wife, the wife who rubs Cooper in Mila's face, and whenever the wife is not around, Cooper is trying to be lovey-dovey with Mila. And then, guess what? The wife leaves again. It is at this point that Cooper finally realizes what he had with Mila, that he essentially threw her away. And what does he do? He tears apart his office and runs away for the second time. The wife's brother comes to Mila and tells her, I am sorry you got caught up in this. I was so caught up in our own personal things. I didn't think about the fact that you were going to get caught up in this. And for a moment you think, oh wow, someone with like a real apology feels bad. No, this is not a true moment of attrition. He comes to her, tells her all this, and then follows up with, I know where he's been going so that you can go and talk to him and get this figured out. She goes there with her friend Harper, who has been having an on-again, off-again thing with Kane, who is betraying his girlfriend with her. And they find not only Cooper, but they find Kane as well. And they are both there with other women. So you have the issue with Kane, who has a girlfriend, is sleeping with Harper, has gotten both of these women pregnant, and is also sleeping with another woman. And then Cooper, who left his fiance for his wife, I mean, he thought she was dead, okay, fine, leaves the fiance for the wife, basically keeps Mila around for whatever reason, hurting her more. And then when he realizes that, oh gee, I screwed up, does he try to fix anything? Does he try to act like a mature adult? No. What does he do? He goes fucking other women, while he tries to figure out how to win Mila back. Eventually, he comes back. Mila forgives him. It doesn't matter how small the crumb Cooper throws her, she will take it and she will be grateful for it. He could kick her in the stomach and she would say, "Thank you, sir. May I please have another?" She has no agency at all. And we're not done. The wife's brother, who has pulled all this shit, abducts Mila with her other former fiance that she did actively break up with at the beginning of the book for cheating on her, makes the former fiance before Cooper videotape with his phone the wife's brother sexually assaulting her. It is very graphic. It is pretty disgusting to read. And they send it to Cooper because they think that it'll make Cooper not want her anymore. And the whole thing is, for whatever reason, the first wife and the first wife's brother want to keep Cooper in pain. And I'm guessing they want his money. I don't know. I never figured out what the reason was. But this is what happened. And I was genuinely surprised when Cooper still wanted Mila, even though she'd been assaulted. Because to be honest, nothing that has happened in this book would make you think that Cooper would still want Mila. Because he is just that kind of fucking asshole that he would give up on her as being damaged goods because of what happened. So the fact that he did want her back is shocking. It's beyond shocking because it's just, there's nothing in this character's background, behavior, actions, anywhere in the story that would indicate to you that he has that depth of emotion for anybody besides himself. And Mila is a character who has, again, no agency. She is beyond lacking in self-esteem. She is the personality of bread. Of plain white bread. That is it. That is the story of Cooper and Mila, and somehow they pull the happily ever after out of the ass on that one. Moving on to story 2. This is the story of Kane and Harper. This one is a little bit better. Kane, again, has treated Mila probably considerably better than Cooper ever did. And in the first book, the only problem I had with Kane was the fact that he was playing two women. And one incident where he called Mila selfish, even though she's literally the most unselfish piece of white bread that ever lived. But in this story, you have Kane and Harper. And Kane, in the first story, you're not understanding why Kane is playing Harper and Ginger. And you find out because he accidentally got both women pregnant, he has to stay with Ginger. You don't know why throughout the whole story. She's literally beating the hell out of him, and you don't know why he stays. You don't know why anything happens. You do learn why Harper seems to be accepting of being the other woman, even though she is in love with Kane, because her father has done the same thing. Her mother at one point had gone into a mental institution, and her father found another woman who he basically had the best of both worlds. This woman knew that he was married. He told her he couldn't get divorced because his wife was in a mental institution. So the woman was like, okay, well, we'll just be together and we'll be a family and it'll be all right. His wife had been released when Harper was still young. So he would spend time at his wife's home and then go and spend time at his mistress's home, proceeding to have kids with her. And he was taking Harper with him, and Harper had to cover for him. So she grew up covering for this kind of behavior. So I'm like, okay, I don't agree with it, but I can kind of understand why she would do it, because it's what she knows. It's the only thing she really understands how to do. And the only thing she sees happening by telling the truth is causing immense pain to two women that she loves dearly. So I get it. I don't agree with it. I don't like it, but I get it. It makes sense. And it does to an extent explain why she is able to be in this situation with Kane and his girlfriend Ginger, because it's really all she's known. Finally, you find out the reason why Ginger was beating the hell out of Cain was because she had, I forget what the diagnosis was, but it was like a legit mental issue, because she had been in a car accident. I believe she was hit by a car, and there was head trauma, and it just caused irreparable damage. So she'd had to be on medication for her whole life to remain stable. When she got pregnant, she had to go off of her meds, and this caused a lot of the issues to come back in full force. She became very paranoid about Cain because she knew that he'd had something with Harper at one point. She didn't know that Cain was the father of Harper's baby, but she had suspicions. Anytime she would see Cain and Harper or have any sort of suspicion, she would become violent. She would either beat on Cain, or if she couldn't, she would start abusing her stomach with their unborn child within it. So she would basically start hurting her baby. So Cain had to stay with her to keep her calm and to be the punching bag until the baby came. That I understand, and I genuinely felt bad for Cain for that, because he was in love with Harper. He wanted to be with Harper, but he had to be with Ginger until she could have the baby and go back on her meds. And then he figured at that point he would get everything figured out then. At no point does he ask for help from his MC brothers, and at no point does he explain what is going on to Harper. And I have to stress this, he did not give Harper any indication as to why Ginger shouldn't know. And Harper's telling him, well, fine, if you don't want to be in our lives, that's fine. We don't have to tell Ginger, but if you're wanting to be in our baby's life, you're going to have to tell Ginger, because she has to understand why you're showing up with my baby to spend time with their sibling, and he's telling her, you can't tell her that, it's not up to you. And at some point, Ginger ends up having to go to the hospital. I believe she'd seen Cain and Harper talking, became paranoid again, began getting upset, and she had to be rushed to the hospital. Harper goes to the hospital because the way Harper sees it, because she doesn't know any different, is that this is what's going to help Ginger. She thinks that if Ginger knows the truth, yes, it'll be hard, yes, it'll suck, but she'll be able to come to terms with it and heal. She doesn't know there's an underlying mental issue here. So she goes to the hospital. She's talking to Ginger. She's trying to be supportive. She's trying to be helpful. And then when Ginger asks her if Cain is the father of her baby too, and she answers yes, she's genuinely horrified and confused when Ginger immediately begins hitting her stomach. The nurses rush in to restrain her. At this point, Cain has come in, and he blames Harper for the state that Ginger is in. And he holds this grudge against her for a very long time. Eventually, Ginger, after the baby has been born, I don't remember how she did it, but Ginger did manage to commit suicide. She had left a letter for Cain with Harper, and eventually she gets this letter to Cain, and he takes a long time to get to reading it, and then he finally does. And in this letter, it's her explanation and apology for what she is about to do. Because she already knew before Harper came to see her that she was going to commit suicide. She already knew that she was going to do this. She gave her explanation. I don't want you or our child to have to live with me like this. The on days, the off days, the depression, the constant fear that I'm going to go off my meds on accident for whatever reason, listing her reasons. I'm not someone who believes necessarily that it's the right choice, but it's the choice that she made, and as a character in a story, I think there is a lot of care with that part of the story. That said, Cain read this letter. He knew Ginger was planning to kill herself already. He knew that Harper was not the reason why this happened. But he still blamed Harper. And he just fell back on this argument that, he would never be able to ignore the emotional pain that Harper caused to Ginger before she killed herself and all this stuff. And just blaming Harper for the fact that he couldn't be bothered to tell her the truth. You know? And I'm not saying it'd be easy. It wouldn't be easy. But if his intention had been to wait till everything was done, calm, Ginger was on her medication, and then he was going to get everything figured out and go to Harper. That said, he knew Harper wanted to be with him. He knew Harper wanted to tell Ginger. He'd already prevented her once from telling Ginger. At that point, he should have told her and said, hey, if you do that, this could be very damaging to her mental health at a time where she's unable to take her meds. You need to back off until she can take her meds. And then once the baby's born, then we can figure everything out. Harper is the type of character she would have definitely abided by that because it made sense. The only reason she went to Ginger was because she felt that it was doing more damage than good in the situation that they were in, which makes sense because she didn't have all the information. And then when Cain gets his head out of it, starts getting his head out of his backside, he's like, well, we're going to have to let the kids see each other because they're siblings. And since that's the case, you know, you're going to have to be a mother to my other child. While at the same time still kind of holding a grudge. And he just expects Harper to go with that. And then when he finally gets his head completely out of his ass, for the most part, he just expects her to forgive him and go on. And I'm like, no. You don't get to blame somebody for the death of your other baby mama because you couldn't see the wisdom in sharing information, pertinent information, to people involved. You behaved like a child, and then you behaved like a child when the outcome was something that you didn't like from the first time you behaved like a child, and then you behaved like a child just expecting everybody to forgive you. I do like Harper a little bit better as a character. I think she's a little bit more sympathetic. She definitely has a little bit more of a backbone, and I'm not even getting into the backstory with her supposed stepbrother from her dad's second family, or the drama her mother caused, because it was just irrelevant to the story. It didn't need to be there. But I was like, Cain didn't deserve a second chance either. So far we are 2 for 0. Cain doesn't deserve a second chance, and Cooper sure as fuck did not deserve a second chance, let alone the 3rd, 4th, 5th he got. So at the end of Cain and Harper's story, we end up with a scene where Tanner, who is the male in the next story, woke up with a woman who is not his wife. So that leads us to Tanner and Brooke's story. Tanner and Brooke have been together throughout the entirety of this series. They've become something of a legend in the first 2 books because Tanner is obsessed with his wife. To the point where if they are not having sex and they are, out somewhere, he just watches her. Like literally watching her. She'll be on her phone doing something and he's just like watching her. So the reason why we're led to believe that Tanner stepped out on his wife was because she'd been cold to him, because it turns out she found out she couldn't have kids. The reason it turned out she couldn't have kids is because Tanner had talked her into having an abortion when they were younger, and it caused damage. So the only way they would ever be able to have kids would be if either A, they adopted, or B, they had in vitro fertilization. So this woman that Tanner believes he cheated on his wife with comes up pregnant. So it's a double whammy for Brooke. She is the only one who does the smart thing and fucking leaves his ass. And then he stalks her. And eventually, people in the club are trying to get her back in as a friend. She starts seeing someone else. There's a lot of really weird, convoluted stuff. And then you find out one of the reasons why Tanner has an issue here is because, he figures out that he did not sleep with this other woman because she says she gave him a BJ. And he knows that doesn't happen because there had been a man when he was a young child who tried to groom him, and part of the grooming was this man would give him a BJ. So he physically cannot have anybody doing that to him now. And this comes into play because again, it shows that he couldn't have been with this other woman. But we also find out this other woman was setting him up because she's the daughter of the man who had tried to groom him and had gone to prison for it. And she and her daddy wanted revenge, and her daddy just got out of jail. And they abducted Brooke. And I remember one of the 3 people involved in this little scheme died, the real father of the baby in question. I don't remember what happened to the baby mama's father. I want to say I think he was killed. And then, so then it's the baby mama and Brooke left in the cabin. And baby mama goes into labor, and Brooke basically has to help her. And by the time the baby comes, the guys from the MC have gotten there. And baby mama leaves. Baby mama waits till everybody's distracted, takes one of the motorcycles after having just given birth, and leaves, leaving her baby with Tanner and Brooke. Tanner and Brooke get back together. They have the in vitro fertilization, and they are raising the baby from the baby mama that it turns out Tanner did not cheat on Brooke with. They're raising that baby, and they have their own baby coming, and they get their happily ever after. That's it. That is the 3 books from this series that I read. That's the 3 that are finished, and I am not planning to read any more. I will say I think the author is improving, because Cooper was the worst, Kane was a little bit less, Tanner was an infinitely much more likable character than the other men, so I see growth as an author. I will try some of her other stories if she ever writes anything outside of this series. I don't think I can read anymore, because every single time I read the other books, I just keep thinking, when is Cooper going to cheat on Mila? Because it's going to happen. That's all I can think the entire time. Extremely unlikable characters. The only likable female is Harper. Well, no, Harper isn't terribly likable. She's more likable. The only 2 women characters that I kind of enjoyed as characters was Brooke and, to an extent, Ginger, because once you understand what happened and why she was the way she was, she's a much more sympathetic character. But all the other characters are trash. The stories are good. They're interesting. I managed to finish reading 3 books, so I'm not saying they're bad stories. I'm just saying the characters are not likable. The stories are good. Like I said, they're well written. They keep your attention. And I do look forward to reading other things from this author if she ever branches out to other stories. But the characters that have been established in this series are not ones I really feel any need to move forward with. They're just trash characters. And that's not talking about how they're written, that's talking about the qualities of the actual characters. And it sounds like it's a judgment on the author, and to an extent it is, but it's also something along the lines of, like with TV shows, you have characters who are just trash. It doesn't mean that the story isn't good, it just means that the characters are bad. But the characters are meant to be bad. In this one, I don't think all of them are meant to be bad, but they are. So there's really not a lot of redeeming qualities to it. So, well-written stories. If you want to read them, by all means read them. They'll keep your attention. They're not like hard to read in terms of storytelling. It's just processing how much you dislike the characters. But I do think the author is good, even if I don't like the way she writes the characters, if that makes sense. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you like having the follow-up spoiler rant videos. Maybe we can do more of them in the future. Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you at the next one. And by the way, Melina, mixing them up. Melina. If you have any other requests, just let me know. Talk to you later.